Knight of Man. So, as I said in the intro, this was a review copy. And if you know me, I don't go easy on games because they're review copies or for any reason at all that I can try to help, except, I mean, even games I love, I go hard on, right? And I found a lot of problems with this one. Notably, there are things that could be fixed in a re-release, I think. So, one of the biggest problems is the rulebook itself. In addition to being glossy, wide print format, all things that I have difficulty with for various reasons. They don't really nail things down enough, and they don't present them in necessarily the most reasonable places when they do. So sometimes something's mentioned once in a rule, and it's not in the easiest to find place. Of course, the format of the rules makes that difficult in and of itself. Then, probably far worse is the cards are kind of handled inconsistently. Sometimes they tell you everything that you need to know to play them, and sometimes you have to refer back into the rule book. And it's not really because of lack of space or whatever to find out, well, wait, does this apply here? So basically, the text of the cards is augmented by a page here of, I think, all the cards, and this tends to have a more complete description of what you need in order to play a card. It's still not 100% hitting everything that you need to know all the time. There is a bit of ambiguity in these rules and in the card play, no matter what. Then in terms of player aids, you have these nice charts that are double-sided, one for each player, that cover the terrain effects chart and targeting modifiers. Hey, that's great. And that's all important information that you need. Maybe there's room here instead of this picture for something else. Over here, the terrain key doesn't always necessarily clearly align with what's on the board, and there's not sort of a good guidance within the rules of what to do. So, as an example there, the rough terrain, well, there's stuff that looks like it might be rough or it might be underbrush. So this is clearly matching the rough terrain that's presented over here, but then there's this kind of scattering stuff, which looks like shrubs or little bushes or something. And that could be rough terrain, or it might be something else that's not on the sheet. Online, the designer has said anything that's not on the terrain key is just nothing, but it's not clear whether or not that's the case. How hills are supposed to be handled, again, not terribly well described. There's a lot of cases like this. The rules could be nailed down in a second edition very, very well. Over here you have an extended sequence of play, which I actually found myself not really looking at too much. It could be helpful. I'm not sure you need 2 copies of it, but I can tell you what you definitely don't need 2 copies of is this promo. And why is that a big deal? Well, first of all, because the card descriptions, if they're not going to be on the cards themselves, and I see no reason why they couldn't be, could be presented somewhere. But also, all these special abilities and powers are again a thing that you constantly have to be looking up. And in the larger scenarios, it's particularly problematic because many of the characters or vehicles or whatever on the board could have some sort of special ability. So that's a wasted opportunity there. I understand the need for advertising, but you really have to print it on a decent card stock that's being given with the game. I don't know. In terms of the gameplay, though, this one slowly started to win me over. There's a lot of hassle to figuring out how the rules are supposed to work. And, you know, the question was, well, is it kind of worth it? Because as you're playing it, you start to realize this is a very random game. I'm getting this handful of cards. I can keep cycling through them relatively quickly. I've got a lot of discard capability. I could be sitting there and could get the magic card draw, or and the game could hinge on that, or I could, and the game can also hinge on how you decide to interpret certain rules as well. But you could also be sitting there and not able to get anything that's useful at all to you. Now, the more pieces you have on the board, the more likely something's going to be useful somewhere. But with the smaller scenarios, you could well be sitting there, and towards the end of a turn as well, with, you know, draws that are just continuously, yeah, I'm looking for one specific card and it's just not showing up, or one of a couple of cards that I might be able to use. And the other guy's got this ability to move around and do stuff all throughout, especially when the pieces get to an imbalance in terms of the number of pieces each player has. So there's that high level of randomness that kind of takes away from, this is not going to be, you know, your highly competitive game. On the other hand, it's a lot of fun. That doesn't show through as much in the solo play. But when you're playing it opposed, there's a certain fast pace to the action in this game where you're just, once you have the rules down, you know, and have figured out how you're going to interpret them, there's a certain amount of just really nice, quick-paced, hey, I can move this, I can do this. That kind of slows down a little bit with the vehicles, and that may be for me at least, and that's a matter of I haven't played with the vehicles very much. I think if I played with them more, I was starting to get the feel for, you know, what the results on the combat for them. They have a more complicated combat system come out as. That you have that kind of hurdle early in the game. What am I doing? How do I get this? You know, and you're looking through the rules and looking at the charts and trying to figure everything out and get your calculations right. But once you do sort of assimilate the system to whatever degree that you've decided, you know, the rules, under whatever rules set that you decide to interpret this as, once you do, it's an incredibly fast-paced game. And actually, well, I haven't played Combat Commander enough, and it was long, long ago, to be able to say, okay, I feel like I'm in the same kind of position. But I'll tell you this much. I felt like I was strategizing more in Combat Commander. I felt like I was agonizing over the cards that I would play or whatever. And this has a lighter feel to it that's really more appealing to me in general. Some players are obviously going to prefer something where, you know, they have more hand management type capabilities. I want to hold on to this card until I get the perfect shot for it. Usually don't have that here. At least I don't feel like I do. I feel like there's so much randomness in here that trying to put that kind of, imposing that kind of control over it seems like a bit much for the game. So it ends up playing a lot faster for me than I remember Combat Commander doing so. Of course, I've gotten to play this solo, which always, I digest a game better solo than I do in an opposed situation. You have a fair amount of stuff here. It doesn't seem like a terribly large amount. First of all, you have 4 of these boards, and they're geomorphic, so you can put them together in a number of different ways. The components themselves, I won't show you the 4th one. They've all been out on the last scenario, at least. The components themselves, silky smooth counters. I've got the counters in the sheet still, because I still haven't decided, do I want to put the counters back in the sheet? They kind of go in there and they kind of stay once they're in there. And I've used to do that with a lot of games. And I've kind of been moving away from that, but it's much easier to find what you're looking for. At least, you know, I mean, obviously with the action markers, not so much. But with the specific vehicles and specific leaders and stuff like that. It's kind of nice to be able to hunt them down. You have a fair number of scenarios here. This is where I thought it was going to really be too little. And if you really get into it, it is going to be too little. But you have a scenario generator and a point system, and you have the capacity to build your own scenarios. And it wouldn't be too tough to draw your own little maps, make up your own powers for some units and make up a few new counters and stuff like that. It really wouldn't be too difficult, and the game almost begs for that kind of thing. But in terms of actual number of scenarios, what do you have? You have, looks like 8 different scenarios here. And most of them are actually fairly large. So here's another 3-mapper. Here's another 3-mapper. I think I may have done the only 4-mapper. Another 3-mapper. Yeah, I think I did the only 4-mapper. What? This one may have all 4 on it. I don't think so. No, it looks like it just has 3. All right. So anyway, there's a fair number of scenarios. You will run out if you're really into the game and playing it a lot. It's not like Combat Commander where you have dozens of scenarios that you can play. But there is the potential that there might be more scenarios going out in the magazine. What is it? Yeah, or whatever. Yeah. I've never seen it, so I don't know. And people might post some online, as well as new maps that you can print out and play on, and new counters that you could make. They wouldn't be as lovely as these, but at least you have you have that potential for expansion of the game. The difficulty is, unless you're willing to put that investment to push through a set of rules that isn't very good and to come up with your conclusions, you've got a couple of problems. And I've been seeing this in a number of games recently. If it does come out with another edition and they clean everything up, that's probably better to wait on. Of course, if everybody waits on that other edition, it'll never happen, right? On the other hand, some people might be happier with living rules. Well, wait so long to see if the rules get cleaned up into a living rules set, or if it just gets abandoned and kind of left behind. One hopes that this game will not be, for the simple fact that it is an expandable set in terms of, it's really begging for those additional expansions. As it stands, you probably have 25, 30 hours of play or whatever in the box, but and that seems reasonable compared to, say, a video game for some people. But of course, for me, because I suck at video games, it takes me forever. But yeah, it seems a little low for for buying a big, nice components, probably fairly high price tag. I don't know, but it sure looks like it sells for more than I'm usually willing to pay for a game. So, yeah, I had a lot more fun with it than I thought I was going to as I was playing. When I played the first scenario, it was so painful, and that wasn't even on video. I played it. I played a trial run, and then I played it with my wife, and then I set it up here and struggled again. So that gives you an idea of just how dumb I am, or more how troubling the rules are at least for me. And that's a serious consideration. If you want something that you can just flip open and play pretty easily out of the box, this isn't it. But then again, neither's Combat Commander. Not unless you have somebody teaching it to you. Not because the rules are horrible or, ambiguous or anything, but because they're organized in a way that is very, very difficult to learn from. Which is why you've not seen me play Combat Commander. It's because, I couldn't, when I opened up my used copy, I couldn't figure out how to set up a game of it, honestly. I read the rules, kind of understood it. I've played it before. Somebody else helped me through it. And, that might be the answer here, is somebody else shows you how to play. The problem, of course, is whatever answers you come to as to how to play this game may be different from what is eventually settled on in living rules. I never like living rules because you have this, okay, look, you have this fancy, glossy, in this case, rule book, which I'm not in favor of, but whatever, with nice pictures and full color and all this, that, and the other. A great deal of money was put into producing this thing, and it needs to be rewritten. And now, you can't pencil in a few little errata pieces, and people making living rules tend not to build the errata. They tend to just say, well, here's the new version of the rules. This is what you should go to. Well, then now you've printed out a copy of the rules and you have, the choice to bind it or whatever, but you don't have a component that's the same as what you bought with the game. And that's why I would say, hey, if you're like me, wait, except for the fact that you'll probably still get a glossy rule set, and it'll probably change at some point in the future. And you maybe are better off with a printed out copy that you can write on with it. In any case, I don't know. But most of that's trends in gaming right now that I don't like. As to the game itself, I had a fair amount of fun with it. I like the story as it develops. I like the randomness in it. It's definitely not a game, though, for the serious competitor type. It's more... It's got more of an Ameritrashy feel in terms of the play, except that you're not chucking bunches of dice or anything like that, and there aren't little minis on the board or anything. And there is a fairly complex system here. Now, one of my big gripes is how the line of sight interacts in it. And I can't think of a way to fix it. It has to do with using squares for the board to some extent. It has to do with, targeting from center of a square to a center of a square. Hexes tend to work a little better when you go center to center. They still can cause problems. And it has to do with putting the actual blocking terrain right at the edge of whatever it is. And it doesn't take into consideration ideas like, okay, well, if somebody's in the building, they can kind of be leaning out the window shooting or something like that. All of that's left behind. If you want that kind of complexity, you want something like Gunslinger, which just bloats, out of proportion in terms of what you're getting for it. But this will leave you with situations where you're like, damn, I should be able to see him, and this is not working out quite how I expected. And that can be very disturbing. I have to say, though, the trade-off between that and the complexity of a system that would catch the line of sight in an urban area especially correctly, it may be worth this lighter system that sometimes leaves you saying, no, that's not fair, right? Anyway, I've shifted my view on this from being very down on it to being kind of mediocre about it. I don't think any game should be put out with rules in the quality level that these had. I just don't think something should get past blind testing with rules of this level. And I hold that pretty hard against a game unless it's just such a fantastic game. And in this case, I can't think of anything that covers this particular, type of situation in quite the same way that this does. So it kind of stands alone in that sense. But I feel like, well, you can get more bang for your buck out of something like Starship Troopers or Combat Commander. depending on which way you want to go. Hey, you want the science fiction or you want the card-driven kind of aspect? In terms of the effort to learn the game and to figure out what the rules actually mean. But neither of those are going to play as light and as kind of fast-paced fun as this does. And I've got to say that appeals to me more in a lot of ways than playing a game that maybe has more meat to it of the same kind of version. But that may be simply because I'm not a big fan of tactical skirmishes. All right, let's end it.